That's why we need your wisdom and guidance through all of that.
It's going to have to be a continuous.
And that's the infection we do not want to spread, is fear. Thing at that. Angles on this. Okay, so yes, so you know, with all of this being so new, it's overwhelming. How are, I guess I should ask you off the top, how are you coping with everything? Well, we'll take it off the cue card. So I'm just curious, how are you doing with everything?
I actually am doing fine, and I feel very energized to be able to help other people. So that's really what my goal is, to give you some suggestions about what I think is going to help us get through this storm. And that's really what it is. It's a storm that we need to learn to address and find ways to make it come out all the better.
You know, some people have described this storm as a bit of a tsunami. But for some people it really is. It's really hard to cope with, and you sympathize with that. This is a very sensitive, trying time for everyone.
Well, you know, the word that we're hearing all over is unprecedented, and I think that really hits it on the nail, right? Because so much has changed and so quickly and so fast, in ways that we weren't prepared for and in ways that we've not experienced before. You know, if you really think about it, in the past when we had things that were really unexpected or more of a crisis situation, for most kids that would have been something like threatening weather. For example, around here it might be a bad blizzard, or in other parts of the country it might be a hurricane. But in those situations, just think about it for a minute. Those incidences happen for a few days. We prepare for them. There's a level of anxiety and panic and preparation. But then it's over in about 2 to 3 days. And this experience is very different. And I think that's where the challenge is for parents to know, well, how do we directly help our kids, but also stay calm? So this is not going to be a couple of days. And in fact, what we're hearing is this may likely be weeks and months. We just don't know. And the other thing is that it's a very silent sort of encroachment, if you will, of this virus slowly spreading across the country and the world, and it's continuing to spread and we can't stop it. So there's not an endpoint in place. We can't quite predict where things are going, and it really generates a tremendous amount of anxiety.
It sure does. So, you know, first few days, I think everyone is just, you guys too, I think we're all just kind of in shock. But as the days linger on and we get into next week, how should we maybe be putting our minds, the right frame of mind to be positive or to not get depressed
Yes.
with such trauma.
I think of anxiety and the fear that people are experiencing to parallel all the messages that we're hearing about coronavirus. In the news and in the briefings that we have every day, we hear really common words like mitigate. We want to mitigate exposure and we want to mitigate the effects of this experience. In much the same, we want to mitigate the level of anxiety that people are going to experience, and particularly for kids and things that we can do at home. You also hear phrases such as we want to flatten the curve. We don't want this to peak off the charts. And there are a lot of ways and a lot of things that we can do to prevent that. And I think that's where parents need to feel empowered that they are at the helm. They have control over a great deal of what's happening over the next weeks and months. And there are certain things that they can do that can make things better. So we do have control, and we do have ways of building in predictability, and that's really important because that's the piece that's really been taken away from us, the uncertainty. We've lost the predictability. We've lost our routines. Kids aren't in school, parents aren't at work. We can't go to our usual activities. We can't do our usual outings. We've been told to socially isolate, which is extremely important, to physically be distant, but to remember that social distancing does not mean social isolation. We need to stay in contact with people. That's extremely important. And I think that's another piece. In times of stress and anxiety, we need each other. We need to be drawn together and be with each other, but we now need to be creative, and we have ways of staying connected with people without physically being close to them like we might have otherwise done in activities. So this is an opportunity to reach out in ways such as social media, media chats with relatives and with friends, writing letters, doing all sorts of things, and helping kids understand and be part of the solution about what can I do, rather than there's nothing I can do and I'm helpless. What can I do? How can I make this better? How can I stay safe? So there's a lot of pieces we can build in to take away the uncertainty and the risk in terms of feeling I can't do anything, and also feel empowered in a way that we can ride this out and we have a plan. That's what's really important.
Having that plan, what I'm hearing is, and having or maybe keeping a ritual. I'm just thinking, with my son, the bedtime ritual.
Yeah.
Anything I think that you guys or anyone can do at home to create normalcy.
Yes.
Or maybe creating habits during the day,
Yeah.
new habits.
Yeah,
now.
so we want to you make a really good point. We want to keep our home routines as familiar as possible. So sleep schedule should stay the same, when we have our meals, etc. But the fact of the matter is, most of us are gone during the day. Kids are in school and parents are at work. So now we have this unknown. We have a lot of time together, and therein lies it's really a gift in many ways of being able to spend time together that we otherwise wouldn't have. So I think that's also how parents need to think about it. How are we going to think about how to now structure our days for what we might call a new normal over the next weeks and months? Very important in that regard is having a very basic routine and schedule for the day. So it may be very simple, such as putting in when I get up, the meal times, and blocks of time like physical activity and exercise, which kids desperately need. They should go outside. They need fresh air. They need room to run and to play. And other activities like school things, having them do some reading or worksheets or other sort of homework or school type activities that challenge their brains. That's very important. Building in social experiences. So connection with kids doesn't mean that they have to physically be with them. Again, as I mentioned, finding ways to stay connected. Putting those into a very basic schedule for the day, blocks of time, for example, and making it visual. That's a very important key. Don't just talk about it, but write out a basic schedule for the day. Put it on the front of the fridge or somewhere else where it's easy to see, so the kids can pass in and out of the kitchen or wherever and be reminded this is what our day is. We've got a plan. We know what's going to happen. That will anchor them to feel like I'm okay. We have control here, we have predictability. That will go a long way.
Just like how you're writing out your notes. It's helping, it takes the
It does.
anxiety away.
Keeps you focused. It keeps things running smoothly. It gives you a plan, and it makes it more cogent. The other thing is it helps parents feel more in control and calmer. And that's a really important piece for parents to remember, that They should monitor their own level of anxiety and panic. This is a significant problem because parents and adults in general feel anxious and fearful about that, about what's going on. But if we transmit that, if you will, much like a virus, we can transmit the anxiety. We don't need to do that. We need to stay calm. We need to be objective. We need to talk with our kids. And that's really important, to have talks with your kids about what's going on. Start out by listening. Don't talk right away, but listen to what they have to say. Listen to what their questions are. I like to say, tell me what you heard about, or what are you hearing from the other kids? Because then you've got an idea about what their perceptions are and how they're processing all the information that's coming in. Give them the facts, but don't overdo it. Don't exceed all of the media coverage 24/7 on TV and elsewhere about all of the things going on, because it's just flooding. Keep it simple, keep them the information that they need, but keep them focused more on what's going on at home. That's what's really important. If parents feel like their anxiety is really escalating and building, that's understandable. And what I'd recommend is reaching out to their family and friends or their caregivers and providers so that we can help them. But don't make the mistake of leaning on your kids, because that will make them even more anxious. They will be like a sponge watching parents, how they handle this. Many times it's even more powerful than the word that we say to the kids. It's how we say it, the tone of our voice, our non-verbal body language, etc., that kids will pick up on. And if they see that as adults we're fearful and anxious, that will make them far more anxious than any word that they hear about on the media or elsewhere. So stay calm, monitor your own responses, translate that calmness within your home, and develop the plan.
One thing that I even notice I'm doing, it seems like it's brushing off on my 19-month-old, is I'm cleaning like mad, and he's copying me, and he's trying to do that too. You know, I mean, is that all? Maybe that's a good way to use this time and this resource of just really trying to do things together in the spirit of keeping everyone safe. What do you think about
It's
that?
a great question, but I would caution parents, there's a sweet spot to cleaning, because you don't want to over-focus on that, because then it generates this feeling that there's danger pervasively throughout our home. So you want to review all of the important steps that we've all been educated about. One of the things I really would like parents to do is tell your kids to help them make signs to put up around the house. Wash your hands. We don't think of these things, right? How we are coughing in our sleeve and not on our hand, etc. All these things that we know are important ways to again mitigate this spread and the problems associated with this virus, and helping them be part of the family, that we're all staying healthy together and that they have an important role.
Wonderful, wonderful advice, and just taking that time to draw that picture will really get them motivated.
Exactly. And we remember, important message, visual cues, visual reminders of what we have to do, visual reminders of what our schedule is. Along that line, I often tell parents in my practice to help kids develop what I call a menu of activities. So before I mentioned that, try to build in every day features of physical exercise, what I call brain exercise, things like reading and school type experiences, and social experiences. Well, we all know what kids are going to migrate to immediately when I have an open day. In fact, I have multiple open days, right? They're all going to go to the screens. And a very strong cautionary message I would have to parents is avoid having multiple long hours of isolation, unstructured time, and on screens. That will worsen the anxiety most of the time, and also often contribute to features of irritability and just feeling much more negative. Engage your kids in other activities. So when they say, I can't have my phone, what am I going to do? I'm bored. You develop a menu, much like you go into a restaurant. I may not know what I want that day, so I look at the menu and then I'm reminded of what my choices are, and I decide that's what I want for that day. The same way, make a menu or a list, for example, of all the physical activities that you can think of together with your kids. You might go outside and go for a walk. You might go for a bike ride. You might do things within the house. Similarly, make lists of things that you can do for what I call brain exercises, things like reading or math problems or puzzles, things like that. And then for social activities, Think of this variety every day. The way I think of it, it's like cross-training for your brain. It strengthens it. It balances it. It keeps things calm. And that's what we really need to convey to our kids.
And it keeps the cabin fever at bay.
Exactly.
How much screen time for everyone would you recommend these during a cabin fever pandemic?
Well, this is such a unique experience,
Right.
right? Because screens are going to be such a critical way for us to stay connected with the world. And it very much depends on the age of the kid, too. If you're using screens such as games and social media and YouTube videos, etc., what I encourage parents to do is think about having blocks of time for them to use it. Scheduled time, not open-ended time that sort of bleeds into the entire day at the expense of everything else. So have a designated time in the morning and maybe in the afternoon where they can do those sorts of things. Ideally do it out into the family room where parents can kind of monitor what they're watching and what messages that they're getting. But very importantly, mix it with these other things that we're talking about that are not screen activity. We have to be flexible. It's a time, again, of unprecedented circumstances. But keep these tenets in mind in the sense of balance, because the balance and the calmness will go a long way in helping kids feel less anxious, more empowered, and better able to deal with whatever's coming down the road. We're developing a new normal, and that's okay. We can be challenged by that, and we can make the best of it. And that's really how we need parents to help kids think about it. How we go into things, the nature of our thoughts and the framework of our thoughts is critical to our emotions and level of stress, etc. So going into it proactively, being creative, and thinking about ways that we can deal with this will help your kids greatly.
Guys, what do you have? Anything else that we?
Oh my gosh, you're amazing.
I know, right?
Like,
I learned so much.
This is good stuff.
Yes, this is going to be so helpful.
That's what I'm trying to see on my
we
notes.
run
Like,
through-
okay, what else do I have on the bottom there?
It's
like, I'm struggling with this.
I
was trying to
feel
peek,
like
but
I love the menu of choices. I think having all of that said,
Written
you know,
out,
I
written
think
out.
that's-
that brings
really
such
good.
great comfort, and I've learned so many things. I'm so glad I got to sit in on this video. So this was just
No, this
perfect. I'm just gonna have